The boy learned early that silence could hurt more than words. In the small coastal town of San Isidro, where fishing boats rested like tired animals along the shore and rusted tin roofs shimmered under the tropical sun, people often spoke loudly. They laughed loudly, argued loudly, and sang loudly. But when it came to Mateo Cruz, many spoke with their eyes instead. Some looked at him with pity. Some with annoyance. Some with something colder. Mateo was 7 years old when his father walked away. Not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. Not even with tears. Just absence. One day, his father was there, mending nets with rough hands and humming old love songs from the radio. The next day, he was gone, leaving behind an unfinished plate of rice, a pair of worn sandals, and a silence that seemed to grow heavier every morning. Mateo's mother, Elena, never explained much. "Your father had his own storms," she would say softly. "Not everyone knows how to survive their storms." Elena worked long hours cleaning houses in town. Some days she returned with sore feet and a small bag of leftovers from kind employers. Other days, she came home with nothing but exhaustion. They lived in a wooden shack near the mangroves, where the floor creaked and rain leaked through the roof. At night, Mateo could hear crickets, waves, and sometimes the distant laughter of families sitting together under brighter lights. Those sounds made him pull his thin blanket tighter. School was not kinder. Mateo was small for his age, thin as bamboo, with oversized hand-me-down clothes and shoes that never quite fit. His classmates noticed everything. They noticed his cracked slippers. They noticed his patched backpack. They noticed that he never had money for snacks. "Hey, Mateo," a boy once called out, holding up a sandwich. "You want this?" Mateo nodded, hope lighting his face. The boy laughed and took a bite. The class erupted in giggles. Mateo did not cry. He learned early that crying only made things worse. What hurt more than hunger were the whispers. His father didn't want him. That's why he left. Maybe the boy is cursed. Mateo did not know what cursed meant, but he knew it was bad. When teachers asked about his father, Mateo looked at the floor. When classmates talked about family days or father's occupations, Mateo stayed silent. He began to believe something was wrong with him. At night, while his mother slept, Mateo would sit near the doorway and stare at the moon. He didn't pray fancy prayers. He didn't know big words. He simply whispered, "God, please don't let my mama be tired forever. Please help me make her smile. And, please, don't forget me." Sometimes he added another line, barely audible. "If you can't change my life, can you at least give me a song?" Mateo loved music, though he had never owned a radio. But songs floated everywhere in San Isidro. From jeepneys passing by, from neighbors' houses, from fishermen singing to themselves while fixing nets. Music felt alive. When Mateo heard a song, something inside his chest loosened. For a few minutes, he forgot about hunger. He forgot about teasing. He forgot about being unwanted. He began humming quietly while walking to school. At first, he didn't realize he could sing. It started with small sounds. Soft humming while washing dishes. Tiny melodies while sweeping the floor. One evening, Elena overheard him. She paused in the doorway, listening. Mateo's voice was fragile, like thin glass, but pure. It wavered sometimes, but there was something haunting in it. Something that made Elena's chest tighten. "Mateo," she said gently. He froze. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. "I wasn't trying to be noisy." Elena shook her head, eyes shining. "Sing again." Mateo hesitated. "I might sound ugly." Elena knelt in front of him and cupped his face. "You could never sound ugly to me." With trembling lips, Mateo sang the tune he had been humming. No lyrics, just melody. When he finished, Elena pulled him into her arms. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. From that night on, singing became Mateo's secret refuge. When school hurt, he sang softly. When hunger gnawed, he sang. When loneliness crept in, he sang. Music became his shelter. But shelters don't always protect you from storms. One day, during music class, the teacher asked students to volunteer to sing. Mateo felt his heart pound. He raised his hand slowly. A few students snickered. The teacher looked surprised but nodded. "All right, Mateo, come here." Mateo stood at the front of the room, legs shaking. He closed his eyes and sang. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. When he finished, the room was quiet. For 1 second. Then laughter exploded. As that's singing. He sounds like a dying cat. Make him stop. The teacher tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Mateo ran out of the classroom. He didn't go home. He hid near the shore, sitting behind an overturned boat. He buried his face in his knees. I knew it, he whispered. I knew I was bad. That night, he didn't sing. For the first time since discovering his voice, he stayed silent. Elena noticed. What's wrong, Anik? She asked. Mateo shook his head. She didn't push. But later, after Mateo fell asleep, Elena sat beside him and whispered a prayer of her own. God, please protect my child's heart. Days turned into weeks. Mateo stopped singing at home. But inside him, songs kept piling up. Unreleased, unheard, heavy. One evening, a storm swept through San Isidro. Rain hammered the roof. Wind rattled the thin walls. The power went out. Darkness filled the shack. Elena lit a small candle. Mateo lay awake, listening to the storm. Suddenly, thunder cracked loudly. Mateo jumped and sat up. Mama, he whispered. I'm here, Elena said. Mateo hesitated. Then, very softly, he began to sing. Not a melody he'd heard before. Not a song from the radio. Words poured out of him. God, I'm small, and I'm scared. But you are big, everywhere. They say I'm nothing, but you know my name. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't practice. It was a prayer. Elena held her breath. Mateo kept singing. About being alone. About being tired. About wanting to be loved. When he finished, tears streamed down Elena's face. She hugged him tightly. That was beautiful, she whispered. Mateo looked confused. It's just my prayer. Sometimes, Elena said, prayers are the most powerful songs. From that night on, Mateo began turning his prayers into songs. He sang quietly, only for himself. Until one person heard him. Old Mang Luis, a retired fisherman who lived near the shore, often sat outside his hut at dusk. One evening, he heard a voice drifting through the air. Not loud, not polished, but filled with emotion. Mang Luis followed the sound. He found Mateo sitting on a rock near the water, singing toward the sunset. Mang Luis didn't interrupt. When Mateo finished, Mang Luis clapped slowly. Mateo jumped. I'm sorry, Mateo said quickly. I didn't mean to bother you. Mang Luis smiled, his face wrinkling like folded paper. Boy, he said, you didn't bother me. You reminded me I'm alive. Mateo blinked. Mang Luis came back the next evening. And the next. Soon, a few more people stopped by. A woman carrying vegetables. A man walking home from work. 2 children passing through. They listened. No one laughed. No one mocked. Some wiped their eyes. Word spread quietly. The boy near the shore sings. The boy sings prayers. The boy makes you feel things. One afternoon, a young woman named Clara arrived with a phone. She was visiting her grandmother in San Isidro. She heard Mateo singing and recorded a short clip. She posted it online with a simple caption. Found this boy singing by the sea. His song feels like a prayer. Clara didn't expect much, but by morning, the video had thousands of views. By evening, hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in. Who is this child? I'm crying. His voice feels like healing. This is real music. Mateo knew nothing about this. He still went to school. Still got teased. Still wore the same cracked slippers. Until one day, a man and woman arrived at the shack. They introduced themselves as producers from a local talent program. Elena thought it was a joke. We saw a video of your son, the woman said. We'd like him to audition. Mateo hid behind his mother. I'm not good, he whispered. The woman knelt to his level. You don't have to be good, she said. You just have to be you. The audition was in the city. Mateo had never left San Isidro. The buildings looked enormous. The streets were loud. Mateo's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Backstage, he saw other kids warming up. Some sang loudly. Some had coaches. Some wore nice clothes. Mateo wore his cleanest shirt, still faded and thin. A boy nearby glanced at him and smirked. You here to clean or to sing? Mateo said nothing. When his number was called, His heart felt like it would burst. He walked onto the stage. Bright lights blinded him. Judges sat behind a long table. A large audience filled the seats. "What will you sing?" a judge asked kindly. Mateo swallowed. "My prayer," he said. Some audience members looked confused. Music started. Mateo closed his eyes. He sang. About being rejected. About feeling invisible. About asking God for a reason to exist. His voice cracked. He didn't hide it. Tears rolled down his face. He kept singing. Halfway through, the room grew silent. By the end, people were crying openly. One judge covered her mouth. Another wiped his eyes. The audience stood. A standing ovation. Mateo looked up, terrified. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. The head judge shook his head. "You did something unforgettable." The clip went viral. National television played it. International pages shared it. News headlines called him the praying singer, the boy with the healing voice, the child who sings to God. Offers came in. Interviews, performances, invitations to bigger stages. Mateo felt overwhelmed. He didn't understand fame. He only understood singing. Elena worried about losing her son to the noise of the world. But she watched Mateo carefully. He was still the same boy. Still shy. Still polite. Still praying before he sang. A global charity organization invited Mateo to perform at an international benefit concert. He would be singing in front of thousands. Broadcast worldwide. Backstage, Mateo felt smaller than ever. What if they laugh like before? He whispered to his mother. Elena held his face. "Even if they do," she said, "you will still be my miracle." Mateo walked onto the massive stage. Huge screens. Bright lights. A sea of faces. His legs trembled. He remembered sitting behind the overturned boat. He remembered praying for a song. He closed his eyes and sang. Not the same prayer as before. A new one. About forgiving. About hope. About loving even when you're hurt. His voice soared. Not because he tried, but because he believed. People around the world watched. Some in hospitals. Some in refugee camps. Some in crowded apartments. Some in quiet living rooms. Many cried. Many prayed along. When Mateo finished, the applause felt endless. But what mattered most to him was what happened later. Backstage, a man approached. He looked familiar. Too familiar. "Mateo," the man said, voice trembling. It was his father. Older. Thinner. Eyes heavy with regret. "I saw you on TV," his father said. I'm sorry." Mateo didn't know what to say. Silence stretched. Finally, Mateo spoke. "I used to think God forgot me," he said softly. "But he didn't. He gave me a song." His father began to cry. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," the man said. Mateo thought about his prayer. About loving even when you're hurt. "I forgive you," Mateo said. Not because it erased the pain, but because he didn't want to carry it anymore. Mateo didn't move into a mansion. He didn't forget San Isidro. He didn't stop singing near the shore. He used his earnings to fix their shack. To help his mother stop working such exhausting hours. To support other children who loved music but had nothing. He returned to his school. Some classmates avoided his eyes. Some apologized. Mateo didn't brag. He didn't boast. He simply smiled. When reporters asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, Mateo answered, "I want to be someone who reminds people they are not forgotten." Years passed. Mateo's voice matured. It grew stronger, deeper, richer. But it never lost its honesty. He released songs. Not about fame. Not about luxury. But about faith, pain, hope, love. His concerts sold out around the world. Yet before every performance, he still whispered, "God, thank you for my song." One evening, standing backstage before another massive show, Mateo watched a recording on his phone. It was an old, shaky video. A small boy sitting on a rock near the sea, singing toward the sunset, praying. Mateo smiled. That boy had been rejected, mocked, ignored, but heaven had listened. The child who once asked not to be forgotten had become a voice remembered across the world. Not because he was perfect. Not because he was polished. But because he sang what many were too afraid to say. And somewhere, in a small coastal town, a little boy who feels invisible might hear Mateo's song. And whisper, "God, if you did it for him, maybe you can do it for me too."